So just a review for anybody who's tuning in, didn't get a chance to see yesterday's discussion. For the next 7 days, I'm going to be popping on and talking about the chakra system. So last week we had a pretty nice discussion about intuition and discussing how do we know when it's our intuition talking, how do we know when it's fear coming up, if it's ego, if it's unhealed wounds that are maybe informing or guiding a session. So that was a nice discussion, but it kind of just, I thought it meandered. So I wanted to get involved with, I wanted to facilitate a discussion that was a little more focused, and it just went a little bit deeper. And I thought I would turn to the book that I wrote, Awakening Soul Force, A Practical Guide to Awakening the Truth Within, and the chakra section to really get into how those energy centers influence how receptive we are to intuitive information, and also the ways in which these intuitive centers can kind of get clogged up with beliefs, thoughts, experiences, wounds, trauma, all the stuff that might get in the way, all the gunk that might clog up the filter that might make it difficult for us to receive intuitive guidance and intuitive information. So we're going to do the deep dive over the next 7 days. Yesterday was the root chakra, the very first chakra in the 7 main chakras. Now we're going to talk about the sacral chakra today. So if y'all are ready, it looks like we've got a few viewers here that are ready to jump in. Cheryl has typed what appears to be a foreign language that I do not understand. Anyang Haseo. Anyang Haseo. I don't know if that's Korean or if it's Mandarin. I know Cheryl is studying multiple languages, like 3 or 4. Pretty cool. When we get to talking about the throat chakra, we will learn that the throat chakra governs language and communication. So learning a new language is one of the things that we can do for ourselves to help bring positive, vibrant energy into the throat chakra, help open that up. Just so we know, a little preview, a little sneak peek. So as I did yesterday, it's Korean, Cheryl says. Very interesting. Muy interesante. Thanks for sharing. So yesterday we read right out of the book, and I'm gonna do the same thing today. So I'm turning to the chakra section. If you hadn't had an opportunity to pick this up, Awakening Soul Force, A Practical Guide to Awakening the Truth Within. This is a book that I released last year, and it's a little over 300 pages, and it is kind of the sample platter of spirituality that for the journey I've been on, and I wanted to share my experiences with people to see how that could possibly help you and others on their journey to becoming more connected to their true self, becoming more connected to the loving truth within. So today we're going to talk about the sacral chakra. I'm going to read right out of the chapter. That way the discussion moves along smoothly. It doesn't meander as much as it tends to when I'm just riffing. So if y'all are ready, let's go ahead and dive into the discussion about the sacral chakra, the second chakra up from the base or the root chakra that we discussed yesterday. What was your favorite creative activity as a child? What did you like to do? What brought you joy? Do you remember when you were first taught, or what you were first taught about your sexuality? Was it explained clearly and celebrated appropriately? Or was there shame or trauma around sex from childhood? Welcome to the realm of the sacral chakra. As children, we're not afraid to express ourselves, whether it's through cartoon drawings or brightly colored costumes. As we get older, though, many of us begin to censor, suppress, or completely ignore these creative impulses. Creativity and unique self-expression are often mocked, looked down upon, and dismissed as childish, unrealistic by authority figures in our culture. We'd be hard-pressed not to find an actor, an actress, a writer, a musician, or an artist who hasn't been told to grow up by people living a more conventional life. What a tragedy it is that our culture has such a callous view of creativity, one of the greatest and most natural gifts of being human. Similarly, in a culture dominated by archaic religious views towards sex and sexuality, there's a chance a lot of us grew up feeling like there was something dirty about sex. Sadly, many of us even experienced trauma around our sexuality growing up. We can buck these cultural oppressions and move into a fuller experience of ourselves, our emotions, creativity, joy, and sexuality by tuning up our sacral chakra. Color. The color of the sacral chakra is orange. Its location. The sacral chakra is centered between the pelvis and the navel, about 2 inches below the belly button. What it is. Our sacral chakra is connected to the qualities of the emotional self: creativity, sexuality, sensuality, fun, and play. Body parts. Physically, this chakra is connected to the health of the reproductive and sex organs, kidneys, bladder, spleen, lower back, hips, and large intestine. Signs of imbalance. The sacral chakra is a beautiful energy center. It is the seat of creativity, relationship, intimacy, sexuality, feelings, and emotional life. When the sacral chakra is in balance, we experience the joy of life. We're open to experiencing pleasure, simply for the sake of pleasure. We take time to indulge in recreation and play. We freely express our creativity, not just through art, but through artful living. We also freely express our emotions and are capable of a good laugh as well as a good cry. We know and understand that sex is a healthy part of our own personal experience and feel free to express and enjoy our sexuality in a pleasurable and a fulfilling manner. Causes for imbalance. Issues in the sacral chakra can arise if we grew up in a household with strict or rigid rules and restrictions, particularly around creative, emotional, or sexual self-expression. Parents or authority figures who displayed coldness or apathy toward our feelings can cause the disturbance in this chakra as well. Any experiences of having our creativity or emotions rejected, scrutinized, or criticized can also cause an imbalance in this energy center. We can also harbor trauma in the sacral chakra if we experience any kind of sexual or emotional abuse or manipulation. So I'll stop this here. The causes for imbalance, this is where we're getting into those things, those experiences that arise. And to make it a simple analogy, this is what gets the gunk to build up in this energy center. So if this energy center is meant to be opened and flow freely and allowing creativity and pleasure and our emotions to flow back and forth without obstruction, well, these kinds of experiences can suddenly throw this chakra out of balance. It can throw it out of alignment. So it's nice to bring these things into our awareness when we're reflecting on our sacral chakra, we're reflecting on our experiences, we're reflecting on our deepest beliefs about stuff that about the areas that we're talking about in our life, right? So we're talking about our creativity, our ability and willingness to play and just kind of have fun, be a goofy kid, our ability to, again, explore sexuality or our sensuality in a healthy way. Those are all things that are really going to be impacted by experiences like growing up in a strict household, having really rigid rules or calloused views towards creativity, not being able to express emotions. That's going to cause us to bind up. And so we're cutting off that flow. So not only is this an important thing to look at when it comes to our physical health, because it's connected to the reproductive and sex organs, kidneys, bladder, spleen, lower back, hips, and large intestines, but also just our ability to express ourselves, our ability to create. It's important to reflect on that and then also look at those thoughts, those beliefs that have been formed by those experiences. Because if we can heal this, bring it to our awareness and transform it, well, then we're going to open up to not only expressing freely here and experiencing a more satisfying and fulfilling, it's just going to be a more satisfying and fulfilling experience for us in general, but it's also going to open us up to intuitive information that we might have been closed off to before. So many people in this group are really interested in their intuitive self and the intuitive side of things. So this is why getting in here and doing this work and getting into what are the underlying thoughts, beliefs, traumas, and experiences that may have disrupted the free flow of energy in this area. The importance is that we can unblock that, open up to a deeper dimension of ourselves, a more true, authentic version of ourselves, but also we can be a channel for that higher love and wisdom and creative intelligence that wants to flow through us and be expressed by us. So this one to me is a really important chakra. And it's also again, it's the second chakra, and it's part of what we call the lower chakras or the earthbound chakras. So there's a lot of implications for this in our physical reality, in our physical body. So that's just something to keep in mind. So let's talk about when it's out of balance, when it's in balance, and what we can do to bring the chakra into balance, because that's what we're all really here for. We all want to figure out how to fix it, right? That's what we're here for. When out of balance. When the sacral chakra is out of balance, it may physically manifest as pure physical exhaustion, chronic low back pain, or pain in the pelvic and hip regions. Kidney problems, as well as urinary and bladder problems, may also manifest here. Infertility, menstruation issues, prostate and uterine problems can be physical indicators of sacral chakra imbalance. Since the sacral chakra is also related to the lower intestines, constipation and diarrhea can also physically indicate excessive or underactive energy in this energy center. Emotional and mental signs of insufficient energy in this chakra include feeling emotionally cold, unenthusiastic, and passionless. Pessimism, feelings of unworthiness, and shameful thoughts can also indicate a blockage in the sacral chakra. We may also experience a low sex drive, feel creatively uninspired, and lack confidence in our ability to express ourselves creatively. If our sacral chakra is underactive, we may have a hard time expressing our emotions, we may experience moodiness, and feel antisocial or invisible to the world. Excessive energy in the sacral chakra can manifest itself as being melodramatic, feeling emotionally overwhelmed, or even being emotionally aggressive, and in some cases, passive-aggressive. A hyperactive sex drive, sex addiction, and promiscuity can all be indicators that there is an excess of energy in this chakra. This may also manifest as feeling overly attached to others or addicted to pleasure in an unhealthy manner. Jealousy and possessiveness can often arise in these instances. So now we're getting into those kind of the signs and symptoms. It's like, oh, if you have a cold, these are the signs and symptoms. If you've got COVID, these are the signs and symptoms. Well, if you've got an underactive or an overactive sacral chakra, here are some of the signs and symptoms. And to me, tuning into these and being aware of these things can be such great indicators that allow us to get into the deeper, subtle level of consciousness from which life is created. So for those folks who, I'm not sure where everybody's scientific views lie, but if you follow some of the revolutions, some of the revolutionary thought in, say, like the quantum physics or the quantum sciences now, one of the things that's happening is the sort of Newtonian model of the world is being turned on its head, saying that the material world is basically the end-all be-all, right? And part of the issue that philosophers and scientists and psychologists and the people who are into asking these deeper questions, the problem they have is, well, how does consciousness arise from matter? That's a big question that we get stuck on. And I remember studying, the British empiricists and the rationalists in classical philosophy, and taking those classes, and Rene Descartes' sort of exploration of mind-body dualism. It's like, oh, well, the mind and body are different things. So where I'm going with this is the old Newtonian model says everything is material, everything is matter in the world, and we're like trying to figure out how does consciousness, creativity, how does that spring from something so like inert, something like matter? Well, the quantum view is now shifting, and it's looking at it almost upside down. It's like, oh no, matter is the growth. Matter is the result of consciousness. So consciousness is first. So the ethereal aspect, the ethereal dimensions of reality, what would be perceived as immaterial dimensions of reality actually give rise to matter. So it's the other way around. And you're probably wondering why I'm explaining all this. It's because everything is energy. And when the Buddha once said, oh geez, I just lost my train of thought. Buddha said a lot of things. All disease begins in the mind. That's where I'm going with this. The Buddha said all disease begins in the mind, and he's referring to consciousness, and that very often there is an energetic root cause of the physical traumas or the physical symptoms that we have. So it's not to say that our moving through the material world doesn't have its own consequences, as we kind of part of the material reality, kind of running around colliding into each other sometimes. But looking at disease and looking at illness and looking at matters of the physical body as symptoms of a deeper issue at the level of energy and at the level of consciousness. And that's why it's really, for me, it was so interesting to dive into these chakras and to look at them from this perspective, and then to get to know them and understand them so deeply, because we can start to connect things that are going on, lessons that we're learning on our spiritual path on an energetic level, and how perhaps a traumatic experience as a child around sexuality or sexual violence later on in life might manifest itself as infertility or some sort of like an STD or something like that, right? It's like that there's actually trauma and energy that has been disrupted that planted the seed for that physical reality to take root. Does that make sense? And this is why I found working with the chakras to be so important and so interesting, because we're looking at all dimensions of ourselves. We're looking at the material side of ourselves. Like I said, the sacral chakra is kidneys, the sex organs. Those are main areas that are physically connected to this energy center. But then we look at all the energetic stuff, the emotional stuff that is connected to. Well, now we get to like kind of map our experiences and how that might manifest as trauma or a block. And when we can identify those things, we can go and do the deep inner spiritual work. It might not solve our problem. It might not heal our disease or our dysfunction or whatever has taken root in the physical body, but it might ease it, It might point us to doing some really deep inner healing that we need to do on our journey at a certain point or time on our path. So that's why I bring all this up, and that's why we're talking about these things at every level. We're talking about on an energetic and ethereal level. We're talking about emotional signs. We're talking about physical symptoms that might indicate that there's some energy disruption in a particular chakra. Oh man, this thing was not scrolling. Coño. People are talking about stuff. How about specific cultural gender roles? Hi, Jeanette. How does consciousness arise from matter? That's a cool thought. Like you said, it's all energy. Well, it's all energy. So, sorry, I'm just catching up with these comments because it was not scrolling. How does consciousness arise from matter? Well, Marissa, no, it's the other side. It's the other way around. And I tend to think that that's what's going on. And I think our quantum sciences are pointing that direction too, is that consciousness doesn't arise from matter. It's that matter is creating the material universe. This is the most dense form of energy. When we talk about the planet, we talk about our bodies. If you think about the solid, liquid, and gas states, this is like a simple science, right? Is that we know that when a water molecule is sped up, it turns into a gas, and we slow it down a little bit, and it's a liquid. And if we freeze it and we slow it down real slow, it turns into matter, and it turns into ice block, right? Think of it like that. Think of energy and the universe as is existing at different and various states, like a solid, liquid, and gas. And it's based on vibration. And so creation begins at the level of consciousness, at the most ethereal, or what people would say is an immaterial level of consciousness. But it's not necessarily immaterial because it's energy. And energy has to obey the laws of physics. So something to think about, right? Is this simply because the particular chakra is off balance or blocked for so long? I'll be curious, Derek, to if you could clarify that. If you could clarify your question. I'm going to continue on. So we went on a little tangent. But we're thinking about why are we looking at all these, why are we looking at the physical signs of a chakra imbalance? Why are we looking at the emotional signs? Why are we looking at this sort of energetic signs? Well, because it often starts at the level of energy and then builds outward into an emotional thing and then maybe to a physical issue. Sometimes it works backwards, and that's how we can trace it. As we're an investigator, right? Is we can work from the physical symptom, working backwards to, that has to do with emotions. Oh, that has to do with, interesting. Yeah, that time that I was told to shut up and stop sharing my stupid art. Oh, wow, that was traumatic. That didn't make me feel good. No wonder I'm terrified of creating anything. I got shut down. It's like stuff like that. Derek says eventually causing a disease. So I know this is going to get really way out there, Derek, but when we start to get in the dimension of consciousness and energy, there are things that are coming. There are things that are happening in this life physically that are going to influence that, but also there's stuff that we're bringing in with us. So questions about past life and how they influence our expression and our experience these days. Faith, Faith who does lives here, she would be a great resource, and maybe we should have a specific discussion about that. But very often, if we look at illness or our disease, something that's coming up for us, we can go back and look and see some sort of trauma or issue right around that we experience. There's a good chance that we've experienced it. Some of it might have come in from a previous lifetime, but looking at what the disease is also an important thing. Cancers are overgrowths. Cancer would be something that multiplies, right? It kind of invades, it takes over. Something that stops functioning would be weak, right? Meaning there's not energy there. So looking at what the actual disease is can also give us signs into what's going on with us energetically. All right, let's get into like the good stuff. That's all the signs and symptoms. Well, how do we bring it into balance? How do we kind of from a level of consciousness and from an intentional place bring energy into this chakra to heal it, to transform it? So first we'll talk about mantras. Very simple mantras. Mantras are basically just an opportunity to like reprogram some thoughts. And if you find yourself having a lot of issues in the sacral area, these are some basic mantras that can get you started. I embrace joy. I embrace my creativity. I embrace my sensuality. I embrace my sexuality. Generating positive energy. Making time for recreation, pleasure, and joy can infuse this center with positive energy. Taking up a creative hobby, such as writing, dancing, music, art, or crafting, can satisfy the creative aspect of this sacral chakra. Exploring sexuality and sensuality in ways that are healthy, stem from your true desires, can also bring healthy energy into the sacral chakra. Generally, relaxing, having fun, and taking responsibility for your emotions can help balance this energy center as well. When you take tangible actions and combine those efforts with consciously working to clear out any negative beliefs, trauma, or energy blocks, you reclaim your ability to create and experience joy from the seat of your sacral chakra. So, a point I want to make about how do we charge this energy center up? How do we get it going and bring it into balance? One of the things we have to shed, and we dove into it yesterday, we talked about the deconditioning thought experiment. We're going to do a little deconditioning thought experiment again today as it relates to the sacral chakra. We have to shed the idea that we have to be good at something, that we have to be professional, that someone else has to approve of any of these things. And I think this is most relatable when it comes to creativity. Creativity is inherent in all of us. We are meant to be creators. That's what we're doing every day. We're here creating life. Whether we recognize it and realize it or not, we are creating life with every thought, every word, every action, every relationship. We're making choices and decisions, and that essentially is a step in the creative process. Creativity is such an important part of not only being human, being sort of a divine instrument, if you will, but it's a really important aspect of our humanity that is meant to flow and be explored. And so doodling and crafting and painting and telling silly jokes, even if they're terrible dad jokes or whatever, like that's all part of the experience of being human. It's part of our self-expression. And it's really important to not cut ourselves off from those things because we think it's goofy or because we think it's not cool or because it's not manly or whatever. And for me, like this was an interesting journey for me because, I grew up, I was a really creative kid. I was really into drawing. I loved to draw cartoons. And I was a child actor and stuff, really super goofy, still goofy. So not pretending that ever went away. And that was just, it was kind of a part of who I am. And as I got deeper and deeper into sports and sports culture, I started to kind of disconnect from that aspect of myself to a certain degree, and I denied it. I didn't think it was cool. I didn't think I could make money doing any of that stuff. It wasn't manly. I was a football player, all that kind of stuff. Like that kind of blocking off to my creativity was creating a block for me in this energy center. And it's funny because I was creative. I remember my junior year was the last year I took art class. I didn't take any art classes, any kind of creative expression in my senior year. And I was very heavy on football, very heavy, focused on my training, my body, trying to get to college and play at the college level. That was like my main focus. And, it wasn't, I don't know, a few months before the creativity found a way, and I picked up playing the drums. And my parents were cool enough to help me grab a drum set for Christmas when I was a senior. And so there was this very short time period where I was really just so focused on sports and all that stuff, and I was not doing any creative activity, but it didn't take long before I got the impulse. And so when I think about that experience for me, it kind of points to that there's this natural flow that wants to come through. And like I stopped drawing. I stopped, I took 2 years of art, and I was really doing a lot of really great work, as a junior and stuff. And I was like, whatever. And I still actually haven't gone back to drawing, but I cut that off, and the water found another way to flow, so to speak. And water is an appropriate example because water is connected to our emotions and this energy center as well. So just for some reflection, think about your point of view, your perspective on some of the things that we've discussed so far as it relates to the sacral chakra. Writing, dancing, music, art, crafting. Is there shame around your sexuality? Let's make it even simpler. Is there shame around experiencing joy? It's easy to get caught up in the creative part of things. People go to the juicy stuff. Ooh, yeah, sexuality and sensuality. But really, just like enjoying a day on the beach. Like one of the things that brings me so much joy is like playing with my niece and nephews. Is so much fun. I get so much just pure, like innocent joy from doing that. And joy is another aspect of this chakra. So if we don't have ways in which we have that experience of just something for just this like kind of pure, unadulterated joy, big belly laughs, being goofy, if that's not present in our life, what are we doing? There's a chance that there's a block, and we can look at that, and it's going to be connected to this energy center, and it's going to be something we can dig down and go, oh, well, how come? Oh, well, I was told that that's inappropriate to like make jokes. I was told that it's not a grown-up thing to do to want to just make music all day. And if we cut ourselves off, because energy wants to flow, it's going to find ways. It's going to find ways to express itself, but it might not always be healthy for us. So that's why I talk about what happens when it's blocked, and that's something you got to figure out on your own. How that works for you. When I have a creative energy block, I definitely feel it. Oh, there you go. Cheryl says it's not ladylike. That's a good one. Yeah, we hear words, stuff like that. It's not ladylike, or yeah, it's not manly. Like, oh, you want to do theater? You want to be an actor? You want to make music? Like, oh, that's cool. That's for wusses, What the heck? That's not manly. All those things can have an impact on this energy center. So if y'all have any ideas, go ahead and throw them out there. If you're thinking about this energy center, and thinking about maybe physical stuff or emotional things that are coming up for you. And, we want to like analyze them a little bit. It'd be super fun to do that. And I'm going to jump us over to, while you guys are throwing some comments up, maybe, we'll do a deconditioning thought experiment again around this. So yesterday, I'm going to go through it. I'm going to read the intro to the deconditioning thought experiment again, because I don't think we could drive this home enough. Because what we're working with here is energy at every level, from the highest vibrating level of consciousness to the physical material body. We're going to get into our thoughts. We're going to think about our beliefs and the ideas and the philosophical ideals we hold in our mind. And we're going to analyze whether that is serving us or not. Whether it's getting in the way of our growth, getting in the way of our expansion, getting in the way of our ability to be an open channel, to be an instrument for God's higher love, wisdom, and creative intelligence. So we're going to do a deconditioning thought experiment. The story we tell ourselves about humanity and who we are as individuals is going to be at the center of the reflective work we're going to engage in moving forward. Therefore, before we dive into the next set of practices, I want us to take a moment and engage in a simple analysis of some of our own sponsoring thoughts. A sponsoring thought is a fundamental idea or belief that precedes the creation of all other thoughts. It's important because it's the soil that the seeds get planted in that helps determine whether we're gonna harvest good fruit. Jesus talks about harvesting fruit a lot, and a good seed in good soil will bring about a good harvest of fruit, or will bring about a harvest of good fruit, and even a good seed in bad soil. Well, we're gonna have some fruit that might, there might be some stuff going on with it. Sponsoring thought is a fundamental idea or belief that precedes the creation of all other thoughts. It is the philosophical soil from which we seed our life, or from which the seed of our life springs and grows, which will determine how vibrant our life may potentially grow to be. Take, for example, the idea that human beings are born sinful and tainted by evil. This is a sponsoring thought about ourselves and all of humanity. If this idea or belief takes root in us through parental, religious, or social conditioning, before we become conscious and self-reflective, what do you suppose will be the unconscious self-image we develop? Will we view our lives, our bodies, our impulses, and our desires as fundamentally good or fundamentally bad? How do you think the guilt and shame around our humanness that arises from this founding idea may impact the energy flowing into our chakra? This is just one example I want to use to illustrate a larger point about what we'll be up to with this thought experiment. Our deepest spiritual and philosophical beliefs, at their very essence, carry an energetic vibration. This energetic vibration can move us more into alignment with our highest conceptions of the divine, love, compassion, and freedom, or this frequency can create an energetic obstacle standing between us and our highest human potentials. So the reason I use that example specifically about the sponsoring thought that people are born sinful and tainted by evil is because it affects, that thought throws all of our chakras way out of whack. So yesterday we looked at how the idea of a belief that human beings are born sinful and evil can be very disruptive to the root chakra, because all of a sudden the world is an unsafe place and we're not sure if we can trust others and the outside world because it's cold, it's calloused, there's a limited amount of resources going around. We are immediately thrust into competition and we're on guard. So that creates a sense of physical insecurity, emotional instability, et cetera, et cetera. So now when we look at what we talked about with the sacral chakra, joy, pleasure, sensuality, creativity, self-expression, our emotions, if we go back to that sponsoring thought that all human beings are born sinful and evil, well, what is that going to do to the sacral chakra? What is that going to do when we start to have feelings that we're told we're not supposed to express? What's going to happen to that chakra center when we're having very natural urges and feelings that we're told are going to make you go to hell, right? those are simple examples of how this sponsoring thought immediately creates sort of this block in a natural flow of energy. Working to become a conscious being, working deeply to understand where your impulses and desires come from, your wants and intentions. That's a lifelong process, but that's the journey of life. That is the journey of being human. And sometimes beliefs get thrown in there that actually cut us off from exploring this humanness in a way that actually liberates us, from ourselves even. Sometimes some of us will there's a hot pan and we're told the pan's hot, don't touch it. We're like, all right, it's cool, I don't have to. And some people do got to touch it before they go, oh shoot, that was hot. And it's not really anybody's place to judge that or whatever. It's just some people got to explore it. They got to figure it out. So we're going to talk a little bit about asking ourselves some questions, and we're going to connect it to the sacral chakra. Let's see what y'all are commenting here. Jean says, getting over the idea that taking time for creative activities that give us joy are unproductive. Yeah, absolutely. It's so productive. You're human. You're human. In fact, I think there's a Kurt Vonnegut. I think I quoted. Let me know what I wrote. I think I quote Kurt Vonnegut in the book here, because there's a really great quote about having creative something. And I read a whole chapter about creativity and how, there's a whole chapter about creativity. I'm not going to find it. There's a whole chapter about creativity and that it's such an essential part of ourselves, and that we don't have to be a professional, and we don't have to, there's no justification for it. We can just like creating, and that's okay. And that's a really important thing to dive into, as Jean's talking about, that it's unproductive. I mean, from a human wellness perspective, from what we're meant to be as human beings, it's a very productive process, even for your own self-reflection, just to express what you've got going on, what wants to come out, to be able to look at it and go, wow, I created this. That's cool. That's awesome. There's something here, a poem, a video, a piece of art, a photograph that wasn't here before. And it's from my perspective, and it's a reflection of, what's going on inside of me. That's a really valuable activity. That's a really valuable venture. Marissa says gardening, a paint and sip. I'm guessing that's like wine. A paint and snack, a poem, a short story, all that stuff is beautiful. Yeah, cooking, snacks, desserts, delicious dinner. Yeah, and that's another thing is cooking. Cooking's a creative expression. It's it's an earthly thing. It's an earthy thing. So we're talking, this is an earth chakra. The sacral chakra is connected to the earth. And so from a really fundamental level, food and cooking, baking, and creating healthy meals, or creating meals that give us like a sense of joy and pleasure, which is an important part of the human experience. Why do we have taste buds if God didn't want us to enjoy like a really yummy chocolate or a delicious pasta, It's part of the experience. It's a beautiful thing. And being open to having that experience without judging it and without shaming it is a really, really important part of this chakra center. Jean says journaling, sketching, reading. Yes. I was a daydreamer and was punished in school, so it took a lot of work to get me back in touch with my imagination. Yeah. And we'll talk more, Cheryl, about that kind of stuff when we get to the third eye as well. So not surprisingly, all the chakras are connected at some level. And because creativity and self-expression is so essential to this energy center, daydreaming and imagination is definitely part of that, and that's connected to one of the higher chakras that we'll talk about. But being able to express yourself, so be able to take that idea and bring it into being, to be able to express it through like a poem or a doodle or art drawing or something, that's an act. That's an act of, it's going to be inspired and come through one center, and the ability to move forward on that and let that flow into physical reality is definitely connected to the sacral chakra. Oh, Cheryl found the quote. Good call. Yeah, Kurt Vonnegut said, practicing an art, no matter how well or badly, is a way to make your soul grow. For heaven's sake, sing in the shower, dance to the radio, tell stories, write a poem, even a lousy poem. Do it as well as you possibly can. You will get an enormous reward. You will have created something. Yeah, that's cool. I love that quote. Obviously, I put it in the book, but it's just, yeah, it's a beautiful part of who and what we are. And as we'll start to come to understand the reason why the chakras are so essential, why we're going to talk about them, and why in the second book I talk about them again, is because when we have our chakras in balance and they're aligned and they're, for the most part, being maintained, it's kind of like changing out the oil filter in the car and stuff like that. We're making sure there's no junk in there. We're becoming aware of the junk that comes up, and we're clearing it out when it comes up. It allows us to be a channel for inspiration and higher dimensions of wisdom. So the lower chakras, the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus have to do with mostly to do with the physical body. Of course, there are emotional and mental dimensions of this, but they're earth chakras. They have to do with like physical existence. The heart chakra is the bridge between the earth chakras and what we call the higher or spirit chakras, and that's the throat, the third eye, and the crown. So if we think about our energy system and it being a clear channel, when we're all in alignment, we are designed energetically to receive inspiration, to tap into our imagination, to the daydreams that Cheryl's talking about. And we're designed to be open and flowing enough to bring that idea from divine inspiration, inspired thought, inspired vision, and to basically let it channel down and bring it into the root, which is our foundation, and make it become part of our physical reality. That's where all this is going, at least from my understanding and from my perspective and how I've come to view it. I could be totally out of my mind. I could be totally, completely making this stuff up, and maybe there's nothing here. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just going through what comes through for me, my experience, and me putting the pieces together one step after the next, one day after the next, just trying to figure it out. And it seems to me that it's not that far out there when we hear people like Steve Jobs was a visionary, and so-and-so is a great director, and oh my gosh, this person, like Tesla. There's all these people, Sofia Coppola is a visionary. Like, what are we talking about? We're talking about people who had inspiration in their mind. One of my favorite, Nina Simone, one of my favorite artists. These are people that tapped into something that didn't exist yet. Whether it was a movie idea, maybe it was an invention, maybe it's a piece of art, it's a book. They take it from up here and then they bring it into physical reality. And all of a sudden we're driving around Tesla cars, we can fly planes. You got a movie that moves you to tears and reminds you what it's like to fall in love and have your heart broken, but, falling back in love again. Like, that's the process. It's cool. Dancing, singing, karaoke. Yes, Marcy Cat. Sorry, I'm just going to catch up on your chat here. I have the desire to be creative, but I feel as I lack imagination at times. I don't feel or see the imagination, if that makes sense. And that's okay, and that's cool, Marissa. You like to cook? You write, you blog. That's a creative expression. We can't put it in a box, We can't put labels, we can't categorize it, we can't base our gift and our ability to be a channel on everyone else's experience of that or expectation of that or their vision of it. So for you, Marissa, yeah, it might not be, maybe you're not going to be, the next Picasso, but you might cook up a mean batch of soup or some really good cookies, and that's a creative expression that's important for you to explore because that's what comes naturally to you. Gene says it makes a lot of sense. Tassa says making it up, but it makes me happy. My pottery is pretty ugly, but I love throwing it on the wheel. Yeah, that's all that matters. It's an expression of it's an extension of yourself, and you get joy out of it. And that in and of itself has a massive amount of value. Has a massive amount of value. If you can't envision things in your mind's eye, how can you receive messages? Well, Lori, that's the thing, and what we're getting into really is all of these energy centers are connected to obviously different dimensions and aspects of ourselves, but we can receive messages in many different ways. So that's what doing this exploration is really all about. It's about experimenting, exploring, working with the chakra systems. The second book that I'm still working on is all about kind of the next step. This stuff we're talking about is like the basis, getting to understand our conditioned beliefs, getting to understand how our experiences, our traumas, our wounding have potentially influenced how we express energy, or how we let energy flow, or whether it flows freely or not in these different energy centers. When we get into the Living with Soul Force book, talks about essentially being a channel. It talks all about the intuitive senses and how there are intuitive senses connected to each one of these chakras. And while we may be stronger in other areas, for example, like clear audience, clear hearing, and clear seeing has always been very, very strong for me for as long as I can remember, but definitely since I was a teenager. As I deepened my practice, I discovered, I'm very clairsentient. I feel things, emotions and stuff. The other one has been the clear knowing. I just know things. I get downloads. That happens. But as I'm expanding my own senses, I'm starting to get a feel for example, my girlfriend Rebecca is really good with food. Like she's into the earthy stuff. She loves plants. She loves cooking food and all that stuff. And so being exposed to her world in that way has opened me up to being more in tune with that, because that's a part of myself that hasn't been exercised a whole lot. A very long-winded way of saying we're getting messages all the time, and our intuition is working with us all the time through these centers. Our job is to ungunk it up, is to make sure the filter is clear so that information that comes in isn't being skewed by our conditioning as much as we possibly can, that the information that's coming in isn't being obstructed by trauma or an unhealed wound or a negative thought pattern. We're trying to the work is to try and clean the slate as much as possible. Try to go back as much as we can to being a child and letting that energy just flow all over the place and seeing what naturally is inspired in us and what naturally wants to be expressed through us. What naturally are we going to become a channel for when we've done the work, cleared it up, cleared it out, and now have created the space to allow inspiration to come in. So to answer your question, Lori, our messages can come in a lot of different ways. And that's the intention behind talking about the intuitive senses and being still and using meditation to kind of get to a place of emotional and energetic neutrality, because it's that place of being a blank slate that allows things to come in. And it could be through feelings, it could be through knowings, it could be through an impulse to cook, it could be an scent that there are so many things, so many ways that messages come to us. The work we're talking about here is about becoming understanding of what's going on with us in an energetic level, what might be blocking us from receiving messages or inspiration in these different areas, and then eventually opening up to allowing information to come. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Marissa says, I like the clearing idea. Thank you. I need to grab it. Yeah, go ahead and grab a copy. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Awakening Soul Force, A Practical Guide to Awakening the Truth Within. This is the foundation. You know, in the second book, I knew what's come through in my guidance is that there's going to be 3 books. And this one's about the foundation and waking up to who and what we are, becoming aware of our conditioning and where we're at. And then the second book is about creating space to allow in inspiration, to receive messages, to receive guidance, to receive wisdom. And then I know the third book is going to be about, well, how do we integrate that and create and become a conscious creator, a conscious co-creator with divine loving wisdom? How do we transcend the old stuff? Because we're shedding a lot of old stuff. This deconditioning thought experiment is all about getting into our old stuff. What are the old beliefs and experiences and traumas that are clouding our vision now that keeps us from seeing reality or experiencing the moment in a new, fresh way, moment to moment? That's kind of the work that we're up to. And so the closer we get to being more clear and kind of purifying the filter, the cleaner that is, the closer we get to touching something real, like very real and inspired. That's what we're working towards, I hope. It's fun. Feels really fun. Jean says she's loving the book. Awesome. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Jean. Thank you. Let's do this one. We're going to play with it. We're going to do a deconditioning thought experiment together. I'm going to use this second one. Do this, walk through this with me, and you can choose to do it in a general way, the way it's presented in the book, or think about how it relates to the sacral chakra. So we've talked about the areas of our physical body, our emotional self, the areas of our experience that are governed by this energy center. Our experience of joy, pleasure, creativity, emotional self-expression, and sexuality are all connected to this energy center. So as we go through these questions, using the prompt here that I wrote about originally, let's just think about how that might affect this energy center. So at the most fundamental level, do you believe you as a person are essentially good, essentially evil, both, or a total blank slate? So you can write it in the comments if you want. You can put an answer in for discussion if you guys want to chat about it. Or you can just think about it, reflect on it on your own. At the most fundamental level, do you believe that you as a person are essentially good, essentially evil, both, or a total blank slate? And you can think of this in terms broad terms, philosophically, or as it relates to the sacral chakra. Now, the next question in this analysis is, why do you believe this? Can you take yourself back to the moment that you felt certain of this judgment? Or when this idea, this sponsoring thought took root, when that seed was planted in the soil of your consciousness? What was the moment that you felt certain of this judgment or this label? And why? Why do you believe that? Did someone tell you that? Were you made to feel bad about something? Were you made to feel really good about something? Were you told you're a rock star? You can do anything you want? Sky's the limit? Look at that sponsoring thought. This is a big question. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get all the way with this next question in this little course. What does your lived experience say about you? Put aside what your parents, teachers, friends, bullies, pastors, priests, and television advertisements have told you about who you are and what you've done. In your heart of hearts, when you lay your head down and you go to sleep, what does your lived experience say about your moral nature? It's a big question. Cheryl says, I believe that I'm a blank slate. Tessa believes I am good. Well, she believes she's good, not me. Interesting. Interesting stuff. I love this stuff. So just one more time, see what arises. What does your lived experience say about you? Put aside what your parents, teachers, friends, bullies, pastors, priests, television advertisements have told you about who you are and what you've done. In your heart of hearts, when you lay your head down and go to sleep, what does your lived experience say about your moral nature? Have you ever done things that you believed were bad? Why? Have you ever done things you believed were good? Why? And for those of you who are like, might be getting a little bit uncomfortable with this line of questioning, it's meant to be uncomfortable. One of my favorite philosophers, and Tab didn't say hi, so I haven't seen if he's on, but my friend and great mentor, both in life and philosophy and creativity, introduced me to Jiddu Krishnamurti. If you want to take a complete and total wrecking ball to your conditioning as a human being and the cultural conditioning that we're exposed to, if you want to take a wrecking ball to that, read Jiddu Krishnamurti. And I'm going to write it down in the chat. Jiddu Krishnamurti will take a wrecking ball to our cultural conditioning, and it's brilliant. So that's what we're doing here. We are challenging our beliefs about ourselves and our world and what we've created, because we want to get down in understanding, well, how does that either support or obstruct the free flow of intuitive, creative, loving intelligence that's meant to come through us? So ask yourself those questions. Have you ever done things that you believed were bad, even if you're a good person? Why? Have you ever done things you believe were good? Why? Just a little self-analysis. And it's meant to just make us reflect on that and to think about, well, what do those things even mean? What does that even mean? We want to break up any of those rigid structures in our minds that might keep us from having a more free and flexible idea about what the world is. Next question. Is there a possibility you have more to learn and experience about your own moral nature before making a broad judgment about who you are? Is there a possibility you have more to learn and experience about your own moral nature before making a broad judgment about who you are? Cheryl says, I believe I have the capacity for good and evil, but the choices I make are basically good. Awesome. I love that interpretation, Cheryl. I love that. Next big question, if you've opened to potentially, like if you've looked at your own moral nature and said, oh, maybe I got a little bit more to learn before making such a broad statement. Are you open to shedding your sponsoring thought about who you are for the sake of understanding yourself more deeply without judgment? Are you open to shedding your sponsoring thought about who you are for the sake of understanding yourself more deeply without judgment? Yes, life and experiences change us. Therefore, I have more to learn about myself. Yeah. Because even when we believe that we're essentially a good person, we can do, and people have, and do, kind of a lot of can do a lot of terrible things because they think what they're doing is good. They think they're on the right side of things, and they do terrible things, harmful, hurtful things in the name of good. That creates a moral quandary, and we should look at that. We should be on it. We have to be honest about those things. And again, it's not about being judgmental, but to what Cheryl brings up. Well, I believe I have the capacity for good and evil, the whole spectrum. Do we have the capacity for all the human experiences within us? That's kind of the question we're asking ourselves. That's one of the things we're thinking about. If you're open to forming a new belief about your moral nature, take a moment and reflect on your own highest vision of who you are. What sponsoring thought would reflect who you truly are? So there's no right or wrong answers here. It's just a thought experiment. It's meant to shake things loose a little bit. If you're open to forming a new belief about your moral nature, take a moment to reflect on your own highest vision of who you are. What new sponsoring thought would reflect who you truly are? So again, we can look at this broadly in terms of our general philosophy towards the world and about ourselves. And the reason in the book, I take us through our belief in humanity as a whole, collective. Then we look at ourselves. What's our view on ourselves? And then what's our view of higher dimensions of human consciousness, of soul, spirit, of God? What are the beliefs we hold about that dimension of our experience? And the reason I point to these three key dimensions of our experience is because our root thought, our sponsoring thought that we discover here, we uncover, informs everything we do. It informs everything that we do. For example, if I believe that God punishes us for doing things, that it's a punishment, that it's a judgment, if I believe that God justifiably punishes us, intentionally causes us harm because of some evil we've done, that lays the foundation for me to do the same thing. Catch where I'm going with that? If I believe that my highest conception of a divine being is angry, vengeful, and retaliatory, I have planted the philosophical seed that is an expression, it's a justifiable action that reflects the highest being. So it's something interesting to play with, right? And it's just that my belief is that our perspective and perception of humanity as a whole, God, the universe, and the view of our own human image, that lays the groundwork for all of our actions. So if I see people as separate than me, if I see someone as not me or as subhuman for whatever reason, because of the color of their skin, because of how they vote, because of where they live in the world, if I see someone as an other, and I don't see them as me or as a human being with wants, desires, hopes, dreams, 7 chakras that are all trying to be their own, bring through their own expression of divine. If I don't see them as that, then I can find myself doing, justifiably doing things that maybe are really harmful. I might bully them. I might make fun of them. I could beat them, abuse them. So those are how those ideas could influence an action, right? Or inspire an action. Then there's the flip side. If I see myself as one with everything else, and I'm really conscious and mindful of like, oh yeah, that's a person having an experience, and they got a family, they've got kids, they got mom and dad, there's somebody's brother, sister, husband, mother. Yeah, that's a person. I'm less likely to lob those labels, you know, those rigid structures we've thrown at people. I'm less likely to do that and paint them in a caricature if I see them from that perspective of, oh, well, they're me. My shirt, love my neighbor. Love thy neighbor as yourself. Those are two very different sponsoring thoughts. I am one with everything, and I am separate from others. Those two can inspire a lot of different actions, a lot of different reactions. So that's something to think about. Something to think about. And it's interesting to think about, again, how that belief then, well, how does that affect how we create? How does that affect the art we bring into the world? How does that affect what brings us joy and pleasure? You know, how does it affect the way we create and share physical experience, you know, the physical sensation of sensuality or whatever, you know? So some really interesting stuff to think about. Cheryl says, in a dual world, we have to accept both our light and dark, good and evil in order to be whole. There's a lot to be said for being really honest and really being and understanding that, yeah, that capacity is there in all of us. But can we master it? That's the journey. As you said, Cheryl, can we make choices? Tassa says, I judge myself way more than most people judge me. Yeah. And so, Tassa, this is a good exercise too, is to realize, how do your thoughts, what ideas and sponsoring thoughts provide the soil that allow those judgments, self-judgments to arise. I'm not saying this. I used to be very self-critical. I'm still my own worst critic. I think I'm pretty good about being objective and like kind of stepping out of myself and be like, that wasn't great. Oh, that was cool. That was a nice thing to do. That was maybe not so great. That's work. But I used to be hypercritical of myself, and I used to be judgmental towards myself. And the interesting thing for me has been, the more I opened up to the authentic version of myself, the more I did the work that I've chronicled here in this book and we're sharing and talking about today, the deeper I dove into that, the more I purified the filters. Two things happened. One is the intuitive senses and all the intuitive information, the inspiration, the creativity, that stuff, off the charts, exploded. Because it's like I just was opening the floodgates, cleared out the boulders, the blocks, and the log jams that were in these energy centers, and it was like, boom, just an explosion of creativity and inspiration and intuitive ability and psychicness. Just what happened. The other thing that went away were harmful self-thoughts and talk. And it just kind of happened naturally. And it's because the soil was cultivated and kind of purified, I think, and cleaned up so much. And I had such a better understanding of myself that anything, when it's lobbed from outside of me, I'm always going to like go, oh, I wonder if does that mean something? And I'll check and see if it resonates, and it doesn't, and you let it go. But it's like critical and like judgmental and harmful self-talk kind of evaporated. And it's just because I was more in tune with who I am. I was more comfortable in my skin. I was not cut off from higher inspiration or a higher vision of myself and the world. But I also just didn't really allow it because it doesn't feel good. You know, so if in my process of going back saying, yeah, when people say that stuff to me or about me, like that makes me feel all kind of funny in my system. The work got me to a point where I don't really have thoughts like that anymore. Where I'm like, oh, is this good enough? Am I not like judgmental stuff? There's always a sense of nervousness, like, oh, am I doing the right thing? But it wasn't like, oh, you're terrible. You're bad at this. You're a horrible person. You should never do that again. You know, you're a terrible artist or a bad director. Or, like that kind of self-talk that keeps us like at war with ourselves. That stuff started to really dissipate and kind of disappear. And that was a lot of work because I wrote a book about doing all this stuff in these chakras, and I did it, and I do it. I still do it every day. I mean, it's like a practice of constantly checking in. What's coming up? You know, what's blocked? What's flowing freely? Where am I strong and powerful right now? Where am I feeling like I could use some work? And that's a much healthier dialogue though than that critical stuff, critical self-judgment. And that's that's ego, it's culture. And it takes work to quiet that part of ourselves down. Don Miguel Ruiz calls it the voice of knowledge. So I know I referenced Don Miguel Ruiz. So if you're still watching, the 4 Agreements, if you haven't picked it up already, but also get the voice of knowledge because he does a really good job of helping us identify that negative self-talk, that part of ourselves that's really about our experiences and our cultural conditioning and our social conditioning and how to like identify it. So the self-consciousness that I used to feel when I would take the stage or get in front of the camera for an audition because I was like, oh, am I going to be the character they're looking for? Is this a good enough? Does my hair look all right? Are my clothes like what the character would wear? This is just an example, but it's like all that stuff, especially when I got behind the camera and I got a better understanding of the process, and so I'm like, it doesn't matter. You just kind of like get comfortable in your own skin and you're like, hey, this is a creative process. I'm just becoming as I go along. I'm growing, evolving. Every single day I'm a different person, minute to minute, moment to moment. And yeah, if I can't be comfortable in my skin, like, am I ever going to be comfortable? No. Again, it doesn't say there's not moments of self-doubt or nervousness, but there's not self-judgment. And a lot of that came from, I think, doing this work. And as Cheryl talked about, coming to terms with, you know, the shadow side or the parts of ourselves that are uncomfortable, that we think are ugly, when they might not be. We just think that. Just understanding it, loving on it, embracing it, and figuring out how to channel it appropriately, you know? So, cool. All right, folks, that's it. That was the sacral chakra. I hope this is helpful. We got a chance to go through some of the deconditioning thought experiment. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. This will be online after the fact. You can refer back to it. I'm going to put it in the announcements, but it's also going to go up on YouTube. So if you want to revisit it, go for it. But thanks to those of you who joined today. I'm glad that you were here. It's nice to have the comments going and to get a little bit of the reflections shared. And what I love about that is we get to see that all of us are moving through this process in our own way, and we're all tackling things in our own way and from a different level. And I always view this journey as a spiral. So just to use a simple example, if you're just kind of cracking open your creativity and not judging that because it's a new thing to like want to take joy and pleasure in that, you're going to have a similar experience over and over and over again. And each time we go up a rung of on the ladder of awareness, we get a little bit more of an expanded view, and we're going to bump up against things that look like old challenges and obstacles that we've faced in the past. But with awareness, we can tackle it from a new perspective, the broader perspective. And so while the work at the beginning can be really, really challenging because we haven't done it yet, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe 60 years or something, we haven't looked at these ourselves in this way. We haven't brought these aspects of ourselves to light. yeah, it's going to be like a lot of work at the beginning, but as we start to slowly but surely clean up the room, it's going to get a little lighter. It's going to get easier. We're going to see it coming a little faster. Things won't get stuck as easy. We'll still have, again, moments of self-doubt or nervousness, anxiousness, fear, anxiety about something that's going on, changes, growth. But just the more we do it, just like any creative process, you learn to kind of push through it, see the problems before they even come, and we grow and we roll with it. And it's a process of just this beautiful evolution of seeing yourself and the world from a broader, wider, more loving and kind perspective. And we're just going to build it out and out and out and out and out and grow up and up and up. And we're going to see things from just a great perspective. And we'll transcend some of that yucky stuff that's kept us in fight or flight and in being at war with ourselves, being at war with each other. And all the problems we see outside of us exist inside of us. And I really, truly do believe that. And if we're angry about stuff that's going on out there, we got to look at what part of us is in there is kind of like that. What are we really wrestling with? It's just an aspect of ourselves. And so if we can love and not judge that part of ourselves, if we can understand it and learn to work with it, not get rid of it, not suppress it, but learn to work with it and understand it so that it doesn't become destructive towards ourselves and not to others, well, we start to learn the ways. We get to do the energetic and social, moral, spiritual jujitsu. We can do it with ourselves. We learn how to do that. We can start to then work with the world in that way. And we won't be as quick to judge or dismiss or cancel someone else or something else because we go, okay, yeah, well, I used to do that. When I got insecure about something, I would lash out. When I felt like I was in a corner, this is what I would do. And you'll see it in other people, and that changes our dynamics with the rest of the world, and it changes our relationship with the world. So if we're going to clean that up, we got to clean it up with ourselves first, and I think that's the journey here. That's what I'm hoping to inspire by sharing this material and these things, that we get inspired to take our own journey to become a master of ourselves. And that'll change the whole world. It'll change your world. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Y'all are awesome. I love this time together. Thanks, Jeanette. I appreciate you. Jean, Cheryl, Marcy Cat, Lori, thank you. Tassa, thank you. Tomorrow, I am doing a meditation for Benny Mudre Wellness at 4 o'clock. I have a Spanish class from 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock. I can't remember what time it's at. It's around 2. So I'm going to post later in the group what time I'm going to pop on tomorrow, but I'm going to find time tomorrow to do the solar plexus. So the next level up in the sacral, in the chakra system is the solar plexus, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. All right, everybody, have a great night. Take care. See ya.